I ended up getting my first job on quote-unquote Wall Street at a Jordan Belfort Wolf of Wall Street spin-out boiler room. I look over at the guy in his Mercedes, and he's smoking like Gordon Gekko. He looks like Gordon Gekko with the hair. We end up clicking for some reason. I believed in it so much. My conviction was so deep that this thing was going to work. But I had to exercise that faith versus I'm talking about real adversity. They were internally in the office buying the shares from my clients and saying, "You're an idiot, it's going to 50, next week." And I was like, whatever, man, I'm doing risk management. I think it's gone up enough and I need some food.
In today's chat with Eric, I'm actually going to talk to him a little bit about how he got into this business and some of the trials and tribulations he's had through this business, because as we've heard over the last few months, he particularly likes highly volatile areas. He likes his crypto, some areas in which people probably don't want to put so much risk. But actually some of the context for the positions he takes could come from the experiences he had moving into this business, and then how he developed his own understanding of what he likes to invest in and how he invests in it over that period of time. So hopefully we'll get a few insights into the mind that drives the investor into these volatile stock areas. And just a reminder that although this is probably not going to have as many investment ideas as we normally have, this is still for engagement, entertainment, and educational purposes. If you're investing, have your own time horizons, your own risk parameters, and do your own research before putting any positions in place. Welcome everybody to Investing in the Minefield, and welcome Eric.
Thanks much, Roger. I look forward to the unconventional way to get into the business that I share.
Well, that's what I'm hoping to hear, because what I love is that you interviewed a couple of people. We've had Rob McGowan, you've interviewed Rick Rule, and what I think most people find fascinating about those interviews, and generally when we talk to investors, is that first question. And it's the question you always asked, and it's a question I've not actually asked you. I've always sort of started about a couple of years in, but how did you get into this business? What took you from high school, university, school, as you guys call it, and then into the investing world at that very beginning?
I came from a blue collar, not poor ghetto, but a blue collar, rough and tumble sort of suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Every male in my hierarchy had, up until the point when I was a kid, been like a machinist or a tool maker, working in factories, probably going back, and I know they were going back to before the World War II, and immigrants, I guess you could say, from different backgrounds, mostly Polish, some German. I guess I'm a mutt from all over Eastern Europe. Also had, sort of the hitting the bottle after work problem with a lot of the, stress of that with everybody in my family, and a lot of financial problems because of that, and just, stints of unemployment. And I remember my mother carried the family on wages of being a hairstylist, which didn't pay very well. I used to remember asking her for her W-2s, seeing that it was like, 15 grand a year, 18 grand tops, and then tips. And I'm like, I look back on it now and I wonder how we made it through. And I had a great level of support. A lot of that was sacrificed to give me, the semblance of a decent image in the sense of growing up. However, I always had this thing in me where I wanted to make money. Anyway, what got me hooked on the stock market was my senior year of high school. I took a business econ class, and that was the first year that I actually got my crap together, partially because my father had died when I was 17, and I guess I got scared straight or whatever it was. And I really dove into this business econ class where the state of Wisconsin in the U.S., still to this day, they do a 10-week for seniors in high school. They do a 10-week program. It's for the stock market. They give you a mock $100,000. My econ teacher, Mr. McCarthy, He said, listen, if you call up, go in the yellow pages back in the day, and you call the investment firms, the brokerage firms in downtown Milwaukee, and you say that you're a student and want to talk to a broker about some ideas because you have the stock market game, a lot of them will be very friendly to you and will do that. So I went home and I started smiling and dialing. I called and I got a guy on the phone. His uncle was the largest producer at Merrill Lynch in Milwaukee, and I got his nephew. And so he was just building his book. But he gave me a couple of picks, and I had called some other brokers and put those picks into play. And I also started charting on a whiteboard. I didn't have, a computer or anything. So I would put the closing prices of these stocks that I followed and see if there was a pattern. In week 6 of the $100,000 program thing, we were in the top 3 in the state for our returns. And we ended up winning the state of Wisconsin in 1993. Cudahy, which is known as this little shithole suburb that should not be competing in this type of thing when your dad, other systems dads were actually at Merrill Lynch and could give them picks. And we won it. And I believe that it was something to the effect of like a 45% return in 10 weeks. So 100 turned into 145. That got my attention. And I had gone to my grandmother and asked her for the $1,000. She was the only one in my family that had any savings. But anyway, then I went to school, and along the way, educated myself on stocks and investing in the market. And I wasn't into school. It wasn't for me. I was basically hanging on with my grades. I took a lot of electives that were like world religions, philosophy, psychology, business. The rest of it I didn't care about. And so it was a really interesting time in my life when one of my roommates that we lived in a house called the Dungeon, which was usually stained with beer on the floor. And if you'd walk, you'd stick to the floor from the parties we would have. We had, some good guys that were in there, but one of them in particular, who's still a good friend of mine to this day, who runs a value fund out of Denver. He was the head of the finance association. He came home one day and, I think at that point I had learned a little bit about, token on something and chilling out and relaxing and doing my thing in college like a lot of us possibly did. And he came home and he said, hey man, you got to get your one tie and suit or whatever on and come to the finance association meeting tonight. You're going to love the speaker. This is your guy. And I was like, what? Because he had never invited me before in a year and a half. And for some reason, there was a storm that happened at that time in Wisconsin. So whoever was flying in from one of the more reputable firms to recruit juniors and seniors in the finance association for various positions, University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, although Division III, has a very, very well-respected finance and econ education department. And he said, so instead, one of the guys that graduated last year is working for a stock brokerage firm in the suburb of Chicago. He's coming in to recruit. I go to this thing and I'm watching. This guy's got slick back hair. He's got an Armani suit. He's looking super sharp. And he starts talking about how the big firms, they like to allocate assets and they like to, go into conservative, your 60-40 portfolio with wealthy high net worth individuals. And he said, we're a little different. We like to do what are called OTC growth stocks. And he gave like an example of one that went up 20 times. And he was just very persuasive and it was on my level. And so I went up to him and I just said, hey, Mark, still remember his name. Hey, Mark, would you ever consider hiring someone who hasn't gotten their bachelor degree yet? He said, well, Eric, you might be in luck. I'm actually a unique situation in this business. I've only got my community college degree out in New Jersey. And he ran the office for this firm in Chicago. Gave me a card and said, call me on Monday.
So did you just give up university then, give him a call and off you went? Did you, sounds like you didn't finish a university degree. You obviously decided that the world for you was the Wild West, the Wild East, whichever end you're at, of the financial markets.
So Monday I called him up. I had an appointment to go down to this area, Arlington Heights in Illinois, which is a suburb. It was over 3-hour drive from where I was at university. I went to my mother's home in Milwaukee first. She helped me buy my first real car, which was a used Volkswagen Jetta that I loved, and I rode it through college, but I couldn't keep up with the registration and insurance payments. So I ended up putting I still remember it. Here's a plug for David Hobbs Honda, if you're still out there. When you used to be able to put a license plate that says, license coming, this was just bought from this dealer. I had that on there for 2 years. I had no registration. I had nothing. I was just like winging it out there, waiting to get pulled over. And I was racing down the interstate, going about 80 miles an hour, trying to make it there. And then all of a sudden, the blue and reds are going off behind me. And I'm like, it's over. My dream of this is over, because he's going to see all the, the citations that he's going to bring to me. They're probably going to impound my car. My license is now invalid because I haven't updated that, nor the insurance or anything else. He pulls me over, and to the point where we're slowing down, and there was one car in front of me that started to pull over too, because he wasn't sure if he was pulling him over. And right at the last second before we came to a stop, I mean, this is my memory of it at this point, he goes around and he pulls the guy in front of me over, and I was sweating, and I took off, and I went to get to the interview, and I show up down there, and it's a big bullpen. I ended up getting my first job on quote unquote Wall Street at a Jordan Belfort Wolf of Wall Street spin out boiler room that I had no idea that existed at that time. And that movies weren't out. We didn't know anything about this. All I know is there were a lot of guys in their 20s driving Mercedes and Beamers and Porsches in the lot, and everybody's standing around on the phone. There's a lot of energy in there, and I go sit in the manager's office. So he takes me in his car to go get a Euro, and he's talking to me, and I look over at the guy in his Mercedes, and he's smoking like Gordon Gekko. He looks like Gordon Gekko with the hair. He's just a very, we end up clicking for some reason. And he's at the end of the interview, I'm like, I'm just graduating my second year of undergrad. I have no money. I don't know what I'm going to do. I was looking at Ohio State because I could get better financial grants and loans. And he says, you know what, Eric, I'm going to give you a shot. And here's the deal. Here's your Series 7 books. You got to pay for these, and then you start studying, and then you're going to get into the business, and we're going to train you, and you're off you go. I always say, when I look back on my life, it was, if you will, God using evil for good, because if I never went there for training on how to sell, how to open accounts, how to call people and get strangers to become a client that I could develop, many of which I still have, but I ended up realizing pretty quick this was a scam. So I overheard a phone call. I was there very late one night, cold calling at 8:30. I was the only guy around next to my manager's office, which was closed. And I could hear the concern I think they were based in New Jersey. There were rumors this particular company had ties to the mob later on, all this stuff. You would never know this as a 21-year-old kid coming in just to try to, wide-eyed and wanting to learn about Wall Street and make a career. So anyway, I got my Series 7 through them. I went through the training program. You're looking at guys everywhere with Rolexes and this and that and all this stuff. And then I'm looking at some of the things we're selling at $8 a share on the offer and $5 on the bid. So I'm going to each of the managers like, why is there such a large spread here? So if I get Tim Jones, the farmer from Southern Illinois, to buy 1,000 shares, he sends in $8,000. If he wants to sell it tomorrow, he gets $5 back. Is that right? Yeah, these are growth stock companies. You need to give them time to grow. So they keep these big spreads. And I was like, this is bullshit. These guys are robbing people. So I ended up getting out of there quick. I wasn't there for even 2.5 months. But I had my Series 7, and I went to go work for an ex-Lehman and ex-Bear Stearns. And I had to start from scratch. Minimum wage was the Illinois state deal. So they had to pay people like us that were commission only minimum wage. And it's a tough racket, right? Making hundreds of phone calls a day, trying to get people, this is back before the internet, to get a lead. I used the formula that I learned from the boiler room, but I used it in a way where I'm like, okay, I'm pretty convinced that these guys They're legitimate veterans. I was at Schneider Securities waiting tables in a out in a mall at a Houlihan's, trying to pay my bills and work all day, paying rent. My grandmother, again, saving my butt and giving me a shot, the only one who had any money whatsoever at all, to in her bank account, passed away of brain cancer right before this all happened. And it actually allowed me, I talked to my uncle to stake me the 10 grand that she was going to leave for me to get this journey started. And that money ran out pretty quick. By the time I didn't make any money for months, I started getting eviction notices on my door in this condo complex. And twice, I remember, got to the last minute and I went downstairs and there was a nice woman who ran these group of complexes. And I would go to her and I would say, look, I have a check coming next Friday. I can give you half of what I owe you and then the other half in 2 weeks and we'll be cleared up. And she would work it out with me and then I wouldn't get evicted. The third time it happened, though, I went there and I'm like, all right, I've taken this to the final step. It's an eviction notice. I went downstairs to have a chat with my friend and she was gone. I was literally homeless. I did not have a place to stay. I found somewhere. It was a very loose friend's parents' guest room that I was able to sleep in. It got really, really tough. I had been building up for months a position in a stock called Modicad that had 3D CAD software, but there was a moment when I was 21 that I had to face moving back home with my mother because it was just not working out and I had nowhere to live and I was going into the office, but I had such a firm belief that this Modicad was going to work. So I'm like, if I leave now, these guys are going to get all my accounts. They're going to make a bunch of money on that. And if I go back to where I come from, I'm never going to get out of there. That's just the way it is with a town like that. And so I was a spiritual guy at that time, like praying, what do I do? There's a YMCA that I don't think it's still there, but it was on Chicago Avenue near State Street in Chicago. And it was filled with crackheads and homeless people. They charged $10 a night to sleep there. I went to the YMCA and I said, because I still had a few days left at my friend's parents' house, I said, how much is it going to cost me if I stay here per night? They said $10. I walked from there back to the train station and I made a decision. I don't care what the fuck it takes. I will sleep in an alley. I'm so close. I can't stop now. I'll sleep with these crackheads and I will make some friends along the way. I'm going to keep it going no matter what. And that was a huge moment for me because just weeks later, there was a guy, I believe he's passed away by now, but when you look at the way things used to work in the promoter business, there was a guy that was notoriously known, Rafi Khan. Rafi Khan, we get a call from the IR woman at Modicad, whom, by the way, everybody in the office was neck deep in Modicad. We were, these were all veteran brokers. And we all loved it. We were all making a huge bet on this thing. And we were buying it at, $4, $5, $6. I was buying the warrants that came out because it was a small underwriting at $1, $1.50. Then the stock doubles to 10. The warrants go up 400%. And Rafi gets involved at, $8, $9, $10 a share on Modicad. And sure enough, within 2 months, this stock is trading massive volume. It's at $17. It's going higher. So it goes to 25 and, we're seeing all this selling come in. Anyway, I'm now up. So I'm up multiples of my clients. Everybody's still buying in the office. And I'm like, I think I have to take some of this off. This would be appropriate. And by the way, I live on in a crazy, crappy shithole. I've never had money to buy my family Christmas gifts the last couple of years. If I sell it in November, I'll get paid between my birthday and Christmas. So I sold like 15% of my position and I made 40 grand in a month. And it was back in the late 90s and it was the first taste I had. But little moments like that were very critical for me to stick around. I think a lot of us have had those.
I think you mentioned it was 2003 where you started getting into the mining space. What was it that got you from trading these dodgy stocks in boiler rooms to going, oh, I think I like mining companies.
When I was going into the internet boom, the first time I ever made any, to me, what was real money was going into the year 2000 with the internet boom, where I was making 50 plus grand a month for 8 months. And I was 25 years old, and I started buying things and having a good time. And then I gave it all back on the back end of that. I didn't understand cycles. I had a painful education in the woodshed from that experience, the market's woodshed. And I learned about that coming back in. And, what I ended up being attracted to really was what we call alternative investments. If somebody said, "What do you do?" I would say I'm an alternative investment advisor, not a broker, not a financial advisor. I was there for that stuff. And, so gold fits in well there, doesn't it? It's like, here's a piece that you can make, something that I can talk about. And we ended up later on, I ended up leaving the business with managing money from a licensed manner. But Fidelity was the firm that we cleared through at that time. This is back when I was about to leave the business. And I was trying to do a direct mail campaign to get people to custody their gold with Fidelity. It was a new program. You could do it in your IRA. You could do it in a single account. And they wouldn't let me send a letter. It wasn't even a security, but I couldn't market anything. I couldn't grow my business. But anyway, the gold that I got invested into, I bought my first gold coin. I believe it was like 2003. Gold was somewhere around $350 or $400 an ounce. And I started to learn more and more about that. My sources of information became, they were more focused on the value of gold and silver and hard assets that I wanted to mix in with some of the high risk, high reward, high beta fund of funds that we were investing in inside of some of the venture capital deals in tech that we were involved in. Medical technology was a specialty of the firm that I worked for. And I wanted to put that all together so that I could actually have clients that I could develop relationships with. And then the mining stocks became a natural second thought. Just like if you find crypto, you buy Bitcoin, then you hear about ETH. This is what happened for me for mining stocks. So in around 2004 or 5, I believe I bought my first gold mining stock for myself. And then I started to monitor that space.
So it sounds like in many ways you've been constantly, I'm going to say not reinventing yourself, but it sounds like the key thing here is being inquisitive, because you have moved from different sector to different sector. Now, obviously you say you've been in miners really since 2003 for 20 years, but in that journey, and now obviously this is a big leap now, but you embraced crypto. How did you get into that? I mean, because the key thing for a lot of investors is that very hard for a lot of investors to move away from their comfort zone. They get into a style or an area and they believe in it, and that's why we get these tribal groups, particularly on social media. What is it? Because of that rather chaotic beginning meant that you're constantly churning, kind of reinventing. Is that, do you think, what has driven you to continue looking at all these different things?
I don't know if it was churning as much as I felt like my self-education was evolving. And I went up the rung into more and more sophisticated areas within the business. I remember being very young. I was on the phone when we would take positions in that Motocad. I was very young. First, a couple of years in the business trying to survive. And what got my attention was the underwriter, when I saw that it went public and we were following this thing going public, and then they got the warrants. And I looked in the deep press release and I'm like, so wait a second. Who's getting the underwriter warrants? Why am I not getting some of that? What, with some of our deals? Who's the banker that I can talk to? I think I like that part of it too. The warrants sound pretty good. And I had made a lot of money for people on that Motocad with focusing on the warrants where there was the leverage right out of the gate. But as I got into it more and more, I started to look for what are people smarter and richer than me doing, and what do they think? That's always been my approach, even to this day. If I'm learning from folks that are experts in a certain area and I trust their judgment, I will gladly become a student at the seat immediately and absorb that information. So anyway, when I went and I did my homework and I said, well, I want to become an internet marketer. My whole thing was I was learning about the internet and I wanted to do what was called inbound marketing. instead of for such a career of pounding the pavement and, ABC always be closing and talking and prospecting and going after all kinds of people to get, this big list of people that ends up into little drips where they become your clients, that's taxing after a long time. I'm like, I want to do this wiser. The internet allows for that. What if I can create funnels where every day, whatever I'm doing, whatever service I'm providing, whatever product I might come up with, that I walk into the office and I've got emails or calls from people that want to talk to me already. What the heck? What a concept, right? And I loved that. And I was like, I want to do that, but I've got to get out of the business because they're not going to let me market things online. So cut the cord. And I had compiled a family office database. And I always wanted to find the family office database because I was going to them for some of the things that we were doing. And then I realized that there was a gap in the market in the RIA side. The RIAs, there was a woman out of the East Coast who had a CRM that you had to pay $5,000 a person for a subscription to get access to all the RIAs. So those two are what kept me afloat. I started learning Google AdWords. I started getting people buying the data. Then I got the president of Forbes.com called me or emailed me one day when I was like trying to keep my office in the John Hancock Center in Chicago and afford it, and said, I'm on your RIA list, but your buttons don't work. I want to buy one of your lists. Can you call me? And I saw president of Forbes.com and I thought it was a joke. And so I called him. He became my biggest client, became a friend. We got to know each other over years. But anyway, when I launched the Gold Investment Letter, it was in the fall of 2011, which was the top of the market, right? But I'm like, I'm going all in on gold. It was very hot. It was the top literal month. And then for 4 years, brutal bear market, over 4 years that I had to build the letter. And I did it slowly and I did it right. And I ended up building that along the way. But then around 2012, probably, I had some subscribers that I attracted. I had some of my older clients that came with me to the letter. And at some point, somebody sent me an article on Bitcoin and I brushed it off. And then another time, I saw an article about Bitcoin myself. I read it. I brushed it off. Somewhere in 13, I believe, I had a couple of people that had said they wanted my opinion because I was a gold guy, right? So they're like, what's the deal? This is digital gold. Do you think it's legit? And I didn't totally brush it off then, but I didn't know how to buy it. I wasn't technically savvy. So what I did, I believe it was 13 or 14, I bought a bunch of Bitcoin domains like bitcoinsbroker.com and stuff on GoDaddy thinking, all right, well, I don't know if this is legit or not, but I'll take a flyer on putting in $400 a year and renew my domains because if it does become big, I don't know how to buy the thing, but maybe I'll make some money on the domains. It finally got to the point where it was like 2014, 15, whenever Bitcoin went up to 1,200 and pulled back to 200, I was kind of watching it out of the corner of my eye. I remember being in an airport and Bitcoin had gone back to like 400 to 500 from that 200. And it was something in me because one of the benefits that I have from the time that I came up, I'm a tape reader. You know what I mean? Like I also have a feel for stocks and markets. I still listen to that in my gut, regardless of what I'm seeing on a technical chart on a screen. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, this asset, whatever the hell it is going higher and it's going to survive. And it's trading like it's going higher. So then I went and I opened a Coinbase account in 2016. I bought my first Bitcoin, a few Bitcoins. It was not a lot of money, a couple grand I put in at $450 a Bitcoin. And then I believe it was the end of April or early May 2016, I recommended Bitcoin officially to all the Gold Investment Letter subscribers. And it was like just under 500 a Bitcoin. So that was my start. But again, as many of us know, I don't even know if you've started this journey yet, Roger. You're still probably kicking the tires while it makes us all rich. But it's a whole new learning process because I did it then, and I say like officially, I recommended to my readers and for myself, I've been in Bitcoin since 500. Okay. But it was stupid, funny money. I was playing around. It was a couple grand. I ended up selling it all at 2,500 early in the run that happened towards the end of 17. And I traded it a bit, this and that, but it got my attention because it reminded me of the internet bubble and why that got so big. My view is that the market is a forward-looking mechanism. It sees in the future somehow. And however the time discount on that is, I don't know exactly, but I believe the internet bubble got so big where you've got like askjeeves.com trading for, $500 a share or something. Was because the market saw how large of a transformation this was going to be for our lives and for commerce and for everything, information, communication. And then that bubble, when it burst, if I would have had and taken the time to learn more about the mechanics of using the internet, that was a mistake I didn't want to make again. So when Bitcoin crashed in late 17, early 18, I said to myself, this run was the 1999-2000 run in the internet. There's something here this market sees that is going to be here for a long time. And that's when I doubled, tripled, quadrupled down. I had a plan of what I was going to do, which is after Bitcoin goes below 8,000 from the correction of 20, I was going to start automatically accumulating it and spend a lot of time learning about it. And that's what I did. I've got over at least 15,000 hours of study on blockchain, Web3, crypto, Bitcoin, you name it. And then it became a big part of my life because in 18, especially in 19, and then the crash of 20, I had been very vocal, even with the gold investment letter people, and half of them told me to go F off because it was the gold versus Bitcoin crowd. I said, look, you don't have to be that way. There's room for both here. It's a us against fiat. So chill out and make some money. So it's the learning process. The churning happened a bit from this focus to that focus because I was learning on the job and I was trying to get smarter and trying to get ahead.
What would you say was your most important trade or position? Not necessarily your most successful one, but the one that, maybe it was Bitcoin, maybe it was that realization from Bitcoin because it opened so many doors. But what would you say was your most important single position or trade in terms of either what it taught you, what it helped you do, what financial security you get? It could be all of the above.
Modicad. Modicad was because I was 21 years old with no money, every week looking at how I'm going to pay for food, transportation, and upcoming rent. And in the face of it, I believed in it so much. My conviction was so deep that this thing was going to work. But I had to exercise that faith versus I'm talking about real adversity. Thankfully, because I was young, I think that helped. But it was like a life or death type of thing for me. It was like, if this doesn't work, or if, I was betting it all on this story. And so doing that in the face of such like uncertainty, Modicad made my career, because when that one hit, I saw how I could make money, how I could make a lot of money. I made people a lot of money. I also made a big mistake then too, because I only sold 15, 20% of it. But I did it in the face of every single other broker around me that had been veterans, and my bosses were still buying it. And I'm like, you guys are idiots. We're up with the warrant, we're up 6x in like 12 to 15 months. I was glad I had Christmas coming up and it was part of my decision. Otherwise, I might have capitulated with them and either not sold any because there was pressure at that time. They were internally in the office buying the shares from my clients and saying, you're an idiot, it's going to 50, next week. And I was like, whatever, man, I'm doing risk management. I think it's gone up enough and I need some food. So
it sounds like it's like, oh, you're an idiot. I mean, it seems to crop up a lot, on the internet even today. On that front, on the reverse front, what would you say was the most chastening thing? Was it the Annus Horribilis of 2008, 2009? Or was there another single trade where you kind of look back and go, I didn't learn from that?
08, 09 was was bad because I was a grown man. I was like 33 years old and I had no money then because I was dealing in venture. And all venture, it's just like owning a restaurant during COVID. Like, it's just done. It stopped. And I had to sell off a lot of my positions that I had invested in at the bottom to continue to operate in life. And it hurt a lot. The big saving grace there for me was that I had spent the prior 3 or 4 years really getting my personal life together. I stopped being an idiot and partying and all that stuff. And I was getting healthy and I was doing a lot of like self work. So when that pressure came and it was that bad, first of all, I despised it. I was like, I can't believe I'm in this position. I'm in a studio apartment in Chicago. I'm, 13 years into a professional career in this stuff. I have nothing to show for it. I'm wiped out. And I had to come to a conclusion where I said, quit the self-pity, dude. Everybody's getting slammed right now. What are you going to do next? And frankly, here's what ends up happening with my career. And it is true that those big adversities can be some of your biggest breakthroughs. Because what did I do? I discovered in 2008, I started using LinkedIn. I was one of the early LinkedIn users. I had meetings every day around my house during the whole crash and after it when nobody was doing anything. Yes, I was looking for business, but I was looking to be active and make contacts. And I used this incredible new tool to do it very early. And that ended up me starting groups in LinkedIn. I ended up, like within a year at like 2010, I was having, 40 or 50 high net worth individuals in a restaurant in Atlanta to raise money for one of our venture companies. Back, getting back on my feet from all the seeds I planted, I was forced to learn about technology. Then, in 2012, 13, I found Airbnb. I started renting out my apartment on Airbnb back then, and it was paying for all of my costs. And I was going back and forth from Hermosa Beach and renting a Land Rover from a friend for $500 a month. And my housing or my flight costs were being paid for back and forth for 2 years. So it taught me a lot of ingenuity. It taught me creativity. And it also taught me that there's only a lot of us that have an addictive personality or whatever, we are very hard on ourselves. And, I'm sure you can relate. Like if we're not operating in a level of perfection, like we get, we really are very angry potentially at ourselves. And I had to learn a lot of lessons through that and just say, listen, man, quit the whining and the party. You're ready. You're finally ready after all this preparation of living your life right. Let's start from scratch. Let's build it up. And this time, hopefully you can keep it all and it'll sustain itself instead of going away in 2 years.
So to finish off then, going forward, what is going to be your formula for not getting angry?
Don't go broke. I don't like being broke. Broke makes me pissed off. But I was just angry 2 weeks ago. I had a situation with my foundation where men in Morocco were physically assaulting women that run a dog shelter. I'm a big dog guy. They poisoned 12 dogs and killed them. And they were trying to physically throw these women out that were the only dog rescue in this area of Morocco. So I got fucking pissed. I put all the business to the side and I was going to go straight to the king, and I'll get there. I didn't need to go that far, but I had mercenaries lined up that were already licensed to come and guard the shelter, strapped to stop these people from attacking these women and these dogs. They had given them a fake eviction notice. They had to be out of there in 3 days, even though that group had lost 2 court battles for this situation. So I still get angry, but it's usually when it's like an injustice, not, and then I just say this, I've got to step in here. That's rare. Listen, just start focusing all your time on political news. You'll get plenty angry pretty quick. Don't waste your time on that shit, guys.
In the meantime, make sure that you've got some assets put to the side off which you can live so that you can then enjoy speculating in the higher octane stuff.
Yeah, and, enjoy some of the fruits of those victories. When you take if you have a high risk reward life and say you took a shot, some of these guys, like, I was watching that documentary about Travis Kalanick and Uber, and he did a lot of stuff that he probably shouldn't have early on, whatever. But look at that thing. That just went public. He was the one dinging the bell on the NYSE. with his dad. And, like that's your life. If you're going to go in there and dig in and make some real changes, and then it starts to come. I find one of the biggest things, and I run like men's mastermind groups and all that stuff with friends. And I have some other, things that really help me to not get, well, if I get angry, I'm going to have it put in perspective by other people and try to learn from that. But also, when you make a lot of money, a lot of people, they just squirrel it all away again for some future that doesn't exist. We have today. I'm staying in a very beautiful home in Miami Beach that I don't need. It's just my dogs and I. But it also is a situation where, like, I almost died 2 years ago. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. Quit being so fucking cheap. Enjoy it. If you have a victory, do something for yourself or somebody around you, or actually, even better yet, give it away to somebody who needs it.
A fantastic journey, volatile journey, interesting journey. But it's good to have that perspective, because it also does give a little bit of perspective around some of the way that you approach the markets. We'll be chatting again next week about the broader markets themselves and whatever's developing over the last week or so.
Thanks so much, Roger. I appreciate the chat.
So, as we heard from Eric there, his investing career, in fact, his life has been quite a dramatic one. There's been lots of highs, lots of lows, but there's been lots of change. And I think it was interesting to listen to how Eric has talked about how the change in his life has often informed the investment and investing that he's done, and how he's never allowed himself to be completely removed or cut off from any opportunity. And when he's seen some opportunities, he's really gone with them with both hands, with a lot of gusto, and really gone into learning as much as he can about those areas. And that is really something that we should all be doing when we're trying to do our investments. So there's quite a lot to take away from that.